Have you ever bought a pumpkin and felt like you made a mistake? Not because it was the wrong size or shape, because something about it felt wrong. Like you shouldn't have brought it home. Like it wanted to come home with you. I ignored that feeling once. Worst decision of my life. This happened to me in October of 2023 when I was 19 years old. I'm a college student in rural Pennsylvania, and every year my friends and I make it a tradition to visit this massive pumpkin patch about 40 minutes outside of town. It's one of those places that's been family-owned for generations, with corn mazes, hay rides, all the classic fall stuff. We'd been going since freshman year, and it had always been fun, wholesome, exactly what you'd expect. That year, 5 of us went together on a Saturday afternoon. The weather was perfect, that crisp autumn air with the sun still warm on your face. We spent maybe 2 hours there taking pictures, getting lost in the corn maze, drinking overpriced cider. Eventually, we split up to find pumpkins. The patch was huge, probably 10 acres with thousands of pumpkins spread across the fields in various stages of ripeness. I wandered pretty far from the main area, looking for something unique. Most of the pumpkins near the entrance were picked over, and I wanted something special for the carving contest my dorm was hosting. That's when I found it, sitting by itself near the edge of the property where the field met the woods. It was medium-sized, perfectly round, with this deep orange color that was almost red in the fading afternoon light. But what really caught my attention was the stem. It was unusually long and curved, almost like a handle, like it was meant to be carried. When I picked it up, I got this weird sensation. You know how sometimes you touch something and it just feels wrong? The temperature was off. Not cold exactly, but not warm from the sun either. Room temperature, like it had been sitting indoors. But I shook it off and carried it back to the entrance where my friends were waiting. On the drive home, the pumpkin sat in my lap since our trunk was full. About halfway back, my friend driving suddenly asked, "Does anyone else smell that?" We all noticed it at the same time. This sweet rotting smell, like overripe fruit mixed with something metallic. We checked our shoes thinking someone had stepped in something, but we couldn't find the source. The smell faded after a few minutes, and we figured it was just the pumpkin starting to go bad. Even though we'd literally just picked it. That night, I set the pumpkin on my desk in my dorm room to carve the next day. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so I had the place to myself. I went to bed around midnight. At 3:47 a.m., I woke up to a sound I'll never forget, a wet tearing sound like someone ripping apart raw meat. It came from my desk. I turned on my phone flashlight and nearly dropped it. The pumpkin had split open, not cracked or broken, split, like something had opened it from the inside. The opening was clean, almost surgical, running from the stem down to the base, and the smell, that same sweet rot from the car, was overwhelming. But here's what made me freeze. Inside the pumpkin, where there should have been seeds and pulp, there was something else. It looked like black mold at first, but it was moving, pulsing, breathing. I watched it contract and expand like lungs, and in the center of this black mass there was a shape. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. It was a face, a human face, formed from the black substance, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. The features were indistinct but undeniably human, and as I watched, paralyzed, the eyes opened. They were completely white, no pupils, but I knew they were looking at me. The mouth opened wider, and that's when I heard it. A whisper so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "Thank you for bringing me home." I ran, grabbed my keys and my phone, and ran straight out of my dorm in my pajamas. I went to the 24-hour library and stayed there until sunrise, surrounded by people under bright fluorescent lights. When I finally worked up the courage to go back to my room around 8 a.m., the pumpkin was gone. Not just the pumpkin, but any trace of it. No split pieces, no seeds on the floor, no smell. My desk was clean, like I'd wiped it down. But I hadn't. I told my RA I'd had a family emergency and moved to a different dorm that same day. I never told anyone what really happened because who would believe me? A haunted pumpkin? It sounds ridiculous. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. The worst part came 3 weeks later. I was walking across campus at night when I passed the parking lot. And there, sitting on the hood of someone's car, was a pumpkin, medium-sized, perfectly round, deep orange-red color, with an unusually long curved stem, like a handle, like it was meant to be carried. And even from 30 feet away I could see it. Carved into its face was a smile, but I absolutely knew that pumpkin hadn't been carved. That smile had opened from the inside. I changed my route after that. I started avoiding that part of campus entirely, but every few days I'd see it, always in a different location. On a bench outside the dining hall, sitting on the steps of my classroom building, perched on a windowsill of the building where I had my work-study job. Always that same pumpkin, always with that smile carved into it. And always when I saw it, I'd catch that smell on the wind, sweet rot and metal. My friends started noticing I was acting weird, jumpy, paranoid, taking strange routes around campus. One of them, Sarah, confronted me about it. I broke down and told her everything. She said I should talk to someone, maybe get some counseling. She was kind about it, but I could see she didn't believe me. She thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Then Sarah went to a Halloween party at a frat house. I didn't go because parties weren't really my thing, especially not in October, not after what happened. The next morning I got a call from another friend. Sarah was in the hospital. She'd fallen down the stairs at the party, broken her leg in 3 places, fractured her wrist. She was going to be okay, but she was pretty traumatized. I went to visit her that afternoon. She was on pain medication, groggy, but when she saw me, she grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. "I saw it," she whispered. At the party, at the bottom of the stairs before I fell, there was a pumpkin. It was smiling at me, and I heard it say your name. She started crying. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm so sorry." After that, more things started happening to people around me. My study group partner got into a car accident. Not serious, but totaled his car. My lab partner developed a sudden, severe allergic reaction to something and had to be rushed to the ER. The guy I'd been casually seeing broke his hand in what he said was a weird accident with a door. None of them died. Nothing was permanent, but everyone close to me was getting hurt. And before each incident, someone would report seeing a pumpkin. In the parking garage, by the coffee shop, on the quad. Always the same one, they'd say with that carved smile. And always, right before something bad happened. I left school in November, told my parents I was having mental health issues and needed to take a semester off. They were worried but supportive. I went home, saw a therapist, got on medication for anxiety. For 3 months, nothing happened. No pumpkin sightings, no mysterious accidents, no strange smells. I started to think maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I had been having some kind of episode. Then last week, my little sister came home from the grocery store. She'd bought a pumpkin for some late-season decorating. One of the last ones the store had. Medium-sized, perfectly round, deep orange-red, with a long curved stem. She set it on our kitchen counter and went to her room. That night I heard that wet, tearing sound again. I found my sister in the kitchen, standing in front of the pumpkin, staring at it. The pumpkin had split open from the inside. That same black mass was inside, pulsing and breathing. But this time there were 2 faces. 2 pairs of white eyes staring out at us. One of them whispered, "Thank you for bringing me home." The other one whispered, "Thank you for bringing me a sister." We're moving next week. Across the country. My parents think it's because of my mental health and I'm letting them believe that. But I know the truth. You can't run from something that travels inside pumpkins. You can't hide from something that's already been invited into your home. All I can do is warn others. If you find a pumpkin by itself away from the others with a stem like a handle, leave it there. If a pumpkin you bring home feels wrong, get rid of it immediately. And if you ever see a pumpkin with a smile you don't remember carving, a smile that looks like it opened from the inside, run. Run and don't look back, because it's already seen you, and it won't stop watching until it finds a way in. Story 2. The Carving Contest. My name is Michael. I'm 34 years old, and I've lived in the same neighborhood in suburban Ohio for the past 6 years. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone. Block parties in the summer, coordinated Christmas lights in December. Very family-friendly, very normal. Or at least it was until last Halloween. Every October, our neighborhood association holds a pumpkin carving contest. It's a big deal with categories for kids, adults, and professional for people who really go all out. The winner gets a trophy, bragging rights, and their pumpkin displayed in the neighborhood entrance for the whole month. I'd entered a few times but never won. I'm decent at carving but not exceptional. Last year I decided I was going to win. I started planning in September, watching YouTube tutorials, practicing on cheap craft pumpkins from the dollar store. I researched the judges' past preferences, looked at previous winners, developed a strategy. I know this sounds insane for a neighborhood pumpkin contest, but I'm competitive by nature, and I'd lost 3 years in a row to the same guy, Derek, who lived 2 streets over. He was insufferable about it, always making comments about his artistic superiority. This was personal. I bought my pumpkin 2 weeks before the contest. I wanted time to let it cure properly for easier carving. I found a beauty at a local farm stand. About 20 pounds, symmetrical, firm, perfect canvas. I stored it in my garage where the temperature was cool and stable. The night before the contest, I set up my workspace in the garage. I had my design printed out, my carving tools laid out, proper lighting. I was going for a complex design, a screaming face emerging from flames, very detailed, very dramatic. I started around 8 p.m., figuring it would take me about 4 hours. The carving went perfectly. Better than perfect, actually. My hands felt steady. My cuts were clean. The details were coming out sharper than I'd practiced. By 11 p.m. I was nearly done, just adding the final touches to the flames. That's when I noticed something strange. The face I'd carved looked familiar. Not like my design. My design was generic, a Halloween-style screaming face. But the face emerging from my pumpkin looked like a specific person. It looked like Derek. I stepped back, unsure if I was seeing things. But no, the features were distinctly Derek's. The slightly hooked nose, the thin lips, even the widow's peak. I'd somehow unconsciously carved my neighbor's face into my pumpkin, which was creepy and embarrassing, but I figured it was my subconscious obsession with beating him. I considered starting over, but it was late and the carving was otherwise flawless. I decided to leave it and just hope no one else noticed the resemblance. I put a candle inside, lit it to see the effect, and I have to admit, it was stunning. The flames looked like they were really moving, and the face's expression in the candlelight was genuinely frightening. The mouth was open in a silent scream, the eyes wide with what looked like genuine terror. I'd outdone myself. I took photos, posted them on Instagram with the contest hashtag, and went to bed feeling confident. I woke up at 7 a.m. to my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, notifications. My first thought was that my pumpkin photos had gone viral, that I'd somehow become internet famous overnight. But when I checked my phone, my stomach dropped. Derek was dead. He died in the night. House fire. The messages were from neighbors, from the neighborhood association president, everyone in shock. The contest was obviously canceled. I immediately felt horrible for every petty, competitive thought I'd had about the man. He was annoying, sure, but he didn't deserve to die. He had a wife, 2 kids. It was a tragedy. I went outside around 9 a.m. You could see the smoke still rising from Derek's street. Fire trucks were still there. Neighbors were gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices. I joined one of the groups and learned the details. The fire had started around 11:30 p.m. in the middle of the night. Derek had been in his garage, apparently working on his contest pumpkin. The fire spread quickly, but his family had escaped. Derek didn't. They found him in the garage, overcome by smoke. I felt sick. At 11:30 p.m., I'd been in my garage, putting the finishing touches on a pumpkin I'd accidentally carved to look like him, a pumpkin where his face was screaming, surrounded by flames. The timing was impossible to ignore, but it had to be a coincidence. A horrible, awful coincidence. I went back to my garage to destroy my pumpkin. I didn't want any evidence of what I'd created. But when I got there, the pumpkin had changed. The expression was different. The mouth, which had been open in a scream, was now closed, almost smiling. And the flames I'd carved around the face looked different too, more controlled, less chaotic. Like they weren't consuming the face anymore. Like the face had control over them. I grabbed a hammer and smashed the pumpkin to pieces. I threw the remains in a garbage bag, drove to a dumpster behind a shopping center 3 miles away and disposed of it. Then I went home, took a long shower, and tried to convince myself I was losing my mind with guilt and grief. The funeral was the following Thursday. I went to pay my respects even though Derek and I had never been close. The whole neighborhood was there. During the service, Derek's wife mentioned that he'd been acting strange the week before he died. Paranoid, she said. He kept insisting that someone was watching him, that he felt eyes on him constantly. He'd even installed extra security cameras around the house. She showed the footage to the fire inspector. The cameras caught something odd the night of the fire. At 11:17 p.m., 13 minutes before the fire started, a shadow crossed in front of Derek's garage window. But there was no one there. No person, no animal, nothing that should have cast a shadow. Just a dark shape moving past the glass. The investigators couldn't explain it. They ruled the fire as accidental, probably a candle used for pumpkin carving that was knocked over. I tried to move on. I really did. But 2 weeks after the funeral, the nightmares started. Every night the same dream. I'm in my garage carving a pumpkin, but I'm not in control of my hands. They're moving on their own, cutting into the pumpkin, creating a face. When I'm done, I light a candle and put it inside. The face begins to glow, and then I hear screaming. Real screaming coming from somewhere else. The face in the pumpkin smiles, and I wake up. After a week of these nightmares, I started seeing things during the day. Pumpkins that weren't there. I'd glance at my counter and see a carved pumpkin for a split second before it vanished. I'd look out my window and see dozens of jack-o'-lanterns lined up on my lawn, all watching my house, and then I'd blink and they'd be gone. I made an appointment with my doctor, thinking maybe I had a brain tumor or something physical causing hallucinations. But then my neighbor across the street, Linda, died. Carbon monoxide poisoning. She was found in her basement where she'd been spray painting decorations for a charity event. The ventilation fan had malfunctioned. She'd been dead for hours before anyone found her. At Linda's funeral, her daughter mentioned that Linda had been having nightmares the week before she died. Nightmares about not being able to breathe, about being trapped in a small dark space. And the night before she died, Linda had told her daughter something strange. She said she'd seen a jack-o'-lantern on her porch that morning, even though she hadn't carved one. It was sitting right by her front door watching her. When she went to move it, it was gone. I started asking around, quietly, carefully, not wanting to sound insane. I found 3 other people in the neighborhood who'd had similar experiences since Halloween. They'd seen pumpkins that weren't there. They'd had nightmares about the ways they feared dying most. They felt watched. And then I found out about the contest history. I dug through old neighborhood association records and discovered something. The pumpkin carving contest had been going on for 12 years. In that time, 7 previous winners had died. All within a year of winning. All in accidents or incidents that matched their contest-winning designs. The woman who'd carved a drowning scene died in a boating accident. The man who'd carved a car crash died when a truck ran a red light. The teenager who'd carved a pumpkin being smashed by a hammer died from a head injury in a fall downstairs. Derek had won 3 years in a row. All 3 of his pumpkins featured fire in some way, and now he died in a fire. I'd never won the contest, but I'd entered. My pumpkin hadn't been judged, but it existed. I'd carved it with intent, with ambition, with the desire to win. And I'd carved Derek's face surrounded by flames. Had I caused his death? Had my pumpkin killed him? I became obsessed with finding answers. I tracked down the person who'd started the contest 12 years ago. His name was Richard, and he was in a nursing home now, early onset dementia. Most days he didn't remember his own name. But when I mentioned the pumpkin contest, something shifted in his eyes. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "I found it in the woods. The pumpkin. The first one." It was already carved, already smiling. I brought it home and everyone loved it. So I planted the seeds. I started the contest. I didn't know. I didn't know what would grow. He died 3 days later. Heart attack. Natural causes, the doctor said. But I knew better. The pumpkins knew he'd talked. I went to those woods, the same patch where Richard must have found that original pumpkin 12 years ago. It took me hours of searching, but I found it. A small clearing where no other plants grew. And in the center, a pumpkin patch. Dozens of pumpkins, all sizes, all growing wild, all already carved. Faces screaming, faces laughing, faces crying. And in the center, the largest pumpkin I'd ever seen. Easily 200 pounds, with a face that looked almost peaceful. I don't know what they are. Some kind of fungus that learned to mimic pumpkins? A curse? A living thing that feeds on fear and death? I don't have answers. All I know is that they're spreading. Every year, people take pumpkins from that patch without knowing it. Every year, more people enter contests, carve faces with ambition and desire. Every year, the pumpkins watch and wait. And when the time is right, they make the carved faces real. I'm moving next month, across the country. I'm not telling anyone where, but I know it won't matter, because 2 days ago I found a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a small pumpkin already carved. The face looked exactly like mine, and the scene around it carved into the sides. It was a moving truck crashed on a highway, flames everywhere. I haven't slept in 2 days. I haven't made any moving arrangements. I'm too afraid that any plan I make will be exactly how I die. The pumpkin is sitting on my kitchen table right now. I've tried to destroy it, but every time I pick up a hammer or a knife, my hand shakes so badly I drop it. The face seems to smile wider every time I try. Last night I heard it for the first time, a whisper coming from the carved mouth. My own voice saying 3 words over and over. Thank you, Michael. I don't know what I'm being thanked for. For entering the contest? For carving Derek's face? For finding the woods? For existing? I don't know. And I'm too terrified to ask. If you're reading this, if you're thinking about entering a pumpkin carving contest this year, don't. If you see a pumpkin patch in the woods where nothing else grows, walk away. If someone gives you a pumpkin that's already carved, burn your house down and run. And if you ever see a jack-o'-lantern with your own face carved into it, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The pumpkin on my table just whispered again. This time it said, soon, I think it's right. Story 3, The Pumpkin Rot. I need to tell this story while I still can, while I still remember who I am. My name is Jessica, I'm 28, and I'm a middle school art teacher in a small town in Vermont. What happened started so innocently, the way the worst things always do. Last October, I decided to do a month-long unit on Halloween art with my 7th grade students. We'd do everything: paper bats, painted ghosts, and of course pumpkin carving. I ordered a dozen pumpkins from a local farm to be delivered to the school. They arrived on the first Monday of October, and I stored them in the art room storage closet until we'd need them for the final week of the unit. The closet was climate controlled, perfect for keeping the pumpkins fresh. I checked on them every few days and they looked great. No soft spots, no mold, nothing unusual, until the Friday before we were scheduled to carve them. I opened the closet and immediately smelled it. That sickeningly sweet smell of rot. My heart sank because I knew I'd have to order new pumpkins and the budget was tight. But when I looked at the pumpkins, they looked fine. Completely fresh, firm to the touch, bright orange. Yet that smell was overwhelming, like something had died in there. I checked behind them, thinking maybe a mouse had gotten trapped and died. But there was nothing. Just 12 perfect pumpkins and that horrible smell. I opened windows, sprayed air freshener, but the smell lingered. My students noticed it on Monday. "Ms. Patterson, what's that smell? Did something die in here?" I made jokes about old food and promised to find the source. By Wednesday, the smell was worse. Gagging, eye-watering, vomit-inducing. I checked the pumpkins again. Still perfect. Not a mark on them. I asked the janitor to help me search the room. We pulled out every supply box, checked every corner, even looked in the ceiling tiles. Nothing. The janitor insisted the smell was coming from the pumpkins, but I showed him they were fresh. He couldn't explain it, so he just shrugged and left. Thursday morning, one of my students, a quiet girl named Emma, didn't show up for class. I got a call from the office during second period. Emma was in the nurse's office having a panic attack. She'd walked past the art room and the smell had triggered something. She was hyperventilating, crying, saying, "It's rotting, it's all rotting, can't you see it's rotting?" The nurse sent her home. I felt terrible. That afternoon, I decided to throw out all the pumpkins and cancel the carving project. But when I went to the closet, I couldn't make myself open the door. The smell was so intense I literally could not force myself to turn the handle. I stood there for 5 minutes, hands shaking, before I finally gave up and called the janitor again. He opened it with no problem. "There's no smell," he said, looking at me strangely. "You feeling okay, Miss Patterson?" But I could smell it. It was suffocating. How could he not smell it? He picked up one of the pumpkins. "These are fine. Fresh as the day they arrived. You sure you're not getting sick or something?" I sent the students home early that day, claiming I had a migraine, but I stayed late staring at those pumpkins, trying to understand what was happening. At around 6 p.m., when the school was empty, I forced myself to approach them. I picked one up. It felt normal. Solid, heavy, room temperature. I held it close to my face, and that's when I saw it. For just a fraction of a second, the pumpkin in my hands wasn't orange. It was gray, covered in black mold, skin sagging and soft, oozing something dark. I dropped it with a scream. It hit the floor and I waited for rotten pumpkin guts to explode everywhere. But nothing happened. The pumpkin rolled a bit, completely intact, perfectly fresh. I ran out of that room and didn't come back until Monday. Over the weekend, I convinced myself I was stressed, maybe having some kind of breakdown. The school counselor once told me that olfactory hallucinations can be caused by anxiety. I was just smelling something that wasn't there, seeing things that weren't real. Monday morning, I walked into my classroom and 3 more students were absent. The school secretary told me they'd all called in sick with the same symptoms: nausea, headaches, and reports of a terrible smell they couldn't get away from. All 3 had been in my art class the previous week. Tuesday, 5 students were absent. Wednesday, 8. By Thursday, half the 7th grade was out sick and all of them had been in my art room. The school nurse called me in for a meeting. She asked if I'd noticed anything unusual about the classroom, any mold or ventilation issues. I told her about the smell, about the pumpkins. She sent an inspector to check for black mold, carbon monoxide, anything that could explain why students were getting sick. They found nothing. Air quality was perfect. No mold anywhere. The inspector picked up one of the pumpkins and said, "These are the freshest pumpkins I've ever seen. Not even a single soft spot. Whatever's making those kids sick, it's not these." But that's when I noticed something else. The pumpkins had grown. Not much, maybe half an inch in diameter each, but they were definitely bigger than when they'd arrived. And there were more of them. I'd ordered 12. Now there were 15 in the closet. I counted 3 times to make sure. 15 pumpkins. 3 more than I'd ordered. 3 more than had been delivered. I checked the delivery receipt. 12 pumpkins signed for by me. So where did the others come from? That night I had the first dream. I was in the art room, but everything was rotting. The desks were covered in black mold. The walls were sagging, the floor was soft and spongy. And in the center of the room was a pile of pumpkins. Hundreds of them, all rotting, all oozing that black substance. As I watched, they began to split open. And something crawled out of each one. Small things like children, but wrong. Too many limbs, faces that weren't quite right, mouths that opened too wide. They all turned to look at me at once and whispered in unison, "Teacher, we're hungry." "What are we learning today?" I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. It was 3:33 a.m. I could smell it in my bedroom. That rot smell, that death smell. It was in my house. It was on my skin. It was inside me somehow. I could taste it in my mouth. Friday, I called in sick. I couldn't go back to that room, couldn't face those pumpkins. But the school called me at noon. Emma, the girl who'd had the panic attack, had been found in her bedroom unresponsive. She was alive but catatonic, staring at nothing, not reacting to any stimuli. And her room smelled like rotting pumpkins. 2 more students were hospitalized over the weekend with the same condition. Alive but gone, staring into nothing, not eating, not drinking, not responding. The doctors couldn't explain it. No drugs in their systems, no head injuries, no medical reason for their state. Monday morning, the principal called me before school. The art room was closed until further notice. Parents were pulling students out. The local news was starting to ask questions. And all the sick students had one thing in common. They'd all been in my art class and they'd all complained about the smell. I finally broke. I told the principal everything. About the pumpkins that looked fresh but smelled like death. About how they'd multiplied. About my dreams. About the smell that no one else could perceive the same way. He listened patiently, and then he gently suggested I take a leave of absence. Paid leave, he assured me. Just until this situation was resolved, I agreed. What else could I do? I went to the school that night to clear out my personal belongings. The building was empty, locked up tight, but I had a key. I went to the art room one last time. The pumpkins had multiplied again. There had to be at least 30 of them now, filling the closet, spilling out onto the floor. And this time, I wasn't the only one who could see what they really were. They were rotting, actually physically rotting. Black mold covered every surface, the skins had collapsed, that dark ooze was pooling on the floor. The smell was so intense I vomited immediately. But here's what made me realize this was beyond anything I understood. The rot was spreading. As I watched, mold began crawling across the closet door, reaching out onto the floor of the art room. Where it touched, things changed. The bright yellow tile became gray and cracked. The colorful student artwork on the walls faded and curled. The desks aged decades in seconds, wood warping and splitting. The rot was alive. It was growing. And it was hungry. I ran. I left my belongings, left everything. and I ran. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station. I told them there was something dangerous at the school, something they needed to see. 2 officers followed me back. By the time we got there, 20 minutes later, the entire art wing was gone. Not destroyed, not burned down, gone. Where the classrooms should have been was just nothing. A void. An absence. The hallway ended in a smooth wall as if the art wing had never existed. The officers stared, not comprehending what they were seeing. One of them radioed for backup, his voice shaking. The school was evacuated the next day. Investigators came, structural engineers, even some people from a federal agency that no one would identify. They studied that wall where the art wing should have been. I heard rumors that it wasn't actually a wall, that it just looked like a wall, that it was something else entirely, something that prevented anyone from getting close to it. The 3 students who'd gone catatonic never recovered. They're in a long-term care facility now, still staring at nothing, still not responding. Sometimes they whisper, and the nurses have reported that they always say the same thing. It's spreading. Can't you see? It's all rotting. I left Vermont. I left teaching. I moved to Arizona, as far from that school as I could get. I thought I'd escaped. For 6 months I was fine. No smell, no dreams, nothing unusual. Then last week I went grocery shopping, and there in the produce section was a display of pumpkins. Halloween is coming again. I walked past them, giving them a wide berth, and that's when I smelled it. Just a hint, just a whisper of that sweet rot smell. I looked at the pumpkins. They looked fresh, perfect, ready to be carved. But I knew. I could see past the surface to what they really were. Every single pumpkin in that display was rotting from the inside out. The rot was hidden, contained, waiting for someone to take them home. I grabbed the store manager and told him those pumpkins were bad, that they needed to throw them out. He looked at me like I was crazy. He picked one up and showed me. "Ma'am, these just came in this morning. They're perfectly fine, but they're not fine. None of them are fine. And now I can see it everywhere. The pumpkins at the farmer's market all rotting inside. The decorative ones at people's front doors hiding what they really are. The ones being sold at every store, every stand, every patch. They're all infected. The rot is in all of them, spreading through every pumpkin in America. Maybe the world. And I'm the only one who can see it. Or maybe I'm just the first one who can see it. Maybe soon others will start to smell what I smell, see what I see. Maybe those 3 students in Vermont were just the beginning. I don't carve pumpkins anymore. I don't go near them, but I can't escape them. Not in October. Not during Halloween season. They're everywhere, multiplying, spreading, waiting. Last night I had the dream again. But this time when the things crawled out of the rotting pumpkins, they had faces I recognized. Emma, the other students, and one of them had my face. I woke up and looked in the mirror. There on my shoulder was a small patch of skin that looked different. Grayish. Soft. When I touched it, it felt spongy like rotting fruit. I've been scratching at it all morning, but it won't come off. It's spreading. Slowly but spreading. I think I understand now. The pumpkins aren't the source of the rot. They're the symptom. The rot was always there, in the ground, in the soil where things grow. It's ancient, patient, and it's been waiting. The pumpkins are just the way it spreads, the way it moves from place to place, person to person. And once you can smell it, once you can see it, it's already inside you. The patch on my shoulder is bigger now. By tomorrow, it'll probably spread to my chest. By next week, who knows? Maybe I'll end up like those students, staring at nothing, watching the world rot from the inside while everyone else goes about their lives, blind to what's really happening. So here's my warning. If you smell something rotting and no one else can smell it, leave. If you see pumpkins that look wrong even though everyone else says they're fine, don't touch them. And if you find a gray patch on your skin that feels too soft, that feels like it's rotting, don't scratch it. Don't draw attention to it. Because once the rot knows you can see it, it'll never let you go. It's Halloween season again. The pumpkins are everywhere, and they're all rotting. Every single one. You just can't see it yet, but you will. Story 4. The Last Harvest. My name is Thomas. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a farmer my entire adult life. Just like my father before me and his father before him. We own a 200-acre property in rural Illinois, and for the last 15 years I've made most of my income from our pumpkin patch. We're one of those agritourism places. Hay rides, corn maze, you pick pumpkins, the whole experience. We get thousands of visitors every October. Got, past tense, because after what happened last season, I burned the entire field, all 200 acres. And I'll never grow another pumpkin as long as I live. It started with the harvest. Every year we plant our pumpkins in late May, and by September we're walking the fields to assess the crop before opening to the public in October. Last September I went out for my first walkthrough, and something was immediately wrong. The pumpkins were huge, significantly bigger than they should have been, given the growing season we'd had. We'd actually had a dry summer with less than ideal conditions, so I'd expected a smaller crop. Instead, some of these pumpkins were massive, 80, 90, even 100 pounds. Prize-winning size. My first thought was excitement. Bigger pumpkins meant we could charge more, meant better photos for customers, meant more revenue. I called my wife Sarah out to see, and she was thrilled. We spent the afternoon walking the rows, counting, estimating what we'd make that season. We calculated it would be our best year ever. But there was something else I noticed that I didn't mention to Sarah. The pumpkins weren't just big. They were perfect. Too perfect. Every single one was symmetrical, unblemished, the exact same shade of orange. In 15 years of farming, I'd never seen anything like it. Nature doesn't work that way. There's always variation, always imperfections, but not in my field. Every pumpkin looked like it had been manufactured, not grown. We opened to the public on the first Saturday of October like we always do. The response was incredible. People went nuts over the pumpkins, taking endless photos, hauling away the giant ones in wagons, posting on social media about finding the perfect pumpkin at our farm. By the end of that first weekend, we'd sold more pumpkins than we usually sold in 2 weeks. The field was mobbed every day after that. We were making money hand over fist. Then the calls started coming in. The first was on a Tuesday about a week after we'd opened. A woman called saying the pumpkin she'd bought was weird. When I asked her to elaborate, she struggled to explain it. The pumpkin was fine, she said, looked great, no visible problems. But she had to get rid of it. She couldn't say why, just that she needed it gone. She wanted to know if she could return it. I laughed it off, figured she was just odd, and told her we didn't do returns on produce. 3 more people called that day with similar stories. The pumpkins were fine, but they needed to get rid of them. One man said his dog wouldn't go near it. Another woman said her 2-year-old kept crying when he saw it. A third caller said they'd thrown theirs away, but it had somehow ended up back on their porch the next morning. By Friday, I'd gotten over 20 calls, all with variations of the same story. The pumpkins were wrong. People couldn't explain how or why, but they were wrong, and people desperately wanted them gone. Some people had thrown them in dumpsters, left them by the roadside, even drove them to landfills. A few reported that no matter what they did, the pumpkins came back. I thought it was mass hysteria, some kind of social media-fueled panic. Maybe someone had posted something stupid online and started a weird trend. But then I went out to the field to check the remaining pumpkins, and that's when I saw what everyone was talking about. The pumpkins had changed. They were still perfect, still beautiful, still orange and symmetrical and unblemished. But they were watching me. I know how that sounds, believe me. But there's no other way to describe it. I could feel hundreds of pumpkins in that field, all oriented toward me, all somehow aware of my presence. I walked down one row and I swear they turned as I passed. Not dramatically, not in a way I could actually see the movement, but when I looked back, they definitely shifted position. I grabbed one and carried it to my truck, planning to take it to the agricultural extension office, get it tested for some kind of disease or contamination, but I couldn't make myself put it in the truck. Every time I tried to set it down in the bed, my hands wouldn't cooperate. They'd start shaking. My arms would lock up and I'd end up just standing there holding this pumpkin, unable to let go or set it down. After 5 minutes of this, the pumpkin started feeling warm. Not sun warm, body warm. Like it had a pulse. I dropped it and ran back to my house. Sarah was in the kitchen and immediately saw something was wrong. I tried to explain, but halfway through my explanation we heard a sound from outside. A thud like something heavy hitting our porch. Then another thud. Then another. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, "What is that?" We went to the front door together and looked out through the window. Our porch was covered in pumpkins. Dozens of them arranged in neat rows, all facing our door. We hadn't put them there. They'd come from the field on their own. I watched through the window as more rolled up from the direction of the patch, moving slowly but deliberately, climbing our porch steps and arranging themselves with the others. We grabbed our phones and locked ourselves in the bedroom. I called the police and to my surprise, they said they'd already received multiple calls about pumpkin incidents that evening. They sent a car. But when the officers arrived and saw our porch, they didn't know what to do. One of them tried to move a pumpkin off the porch, but he couldn't pick it up. He was a big guy. Easily could have lifted a 100-pound pumpkin, but he couldn't get it off the ground. He tried both hands, tried getting leverage, tried everything. The pumpkin wouldn't budge. The officers left, saying they'd file a report, but there wasn't much they could do about agricultural anomalies. We were on our own. Sarah wanted to leave, drive to a hotel, get away from the farm, but when we tried to go out the back door to get to our car, there were pumpkins there too. They'd surrounded the entire house. We spent that night locked inside, listening to sounds we couldn't explain. Scraping sounds like something hard being dragged across wood, soft thuds as more pumpkins arrived. And worst of all, a low vibration that we could feel through the floor. A rhythmic pulsing that matched a heartbeat. By morning, the pumpkins had multiplied. Our entire house was surrounded by them, 3 or 4 deep, hundreds of them. The field in the distance looked bare. Every pumpkin had come to our house, and when the sun came up and we could see them clearly, we noticed they'd changed again. Each pumpkin now had a face. Not carved faces. Natural formations in the skin. Shadows and discolorations that created the impression of eyes, noses, mouths. And every face was different, distinct, individual. They were harvesting themselves, I realized. They didn't need us to pick them, didn't need customers to buy them. They were ready and they'd come to collect. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know what would have happened if we'd stayed. But around noon, there was a gap in the pumpkins. A clear path from our back door to the barn. Sarah saw it first and grabbed my arm. "We have to go now," we ran. We didn't take anything, didn't pack, didn't even grab our phones. We just ran through that gap to the barn, got in our old truck and drove through the field, crushing pumpkins as we went. I'll never forget the sound they made when the tires rolled over them. Not the wet crunch of normal pumpkins. Something harder, more resistant, and underneath that, something that might have been screaming. We drove straight to Sarah's sister's house 3 hours away. We stayed there for 2 days before I worked up the courage to call our neighbor and ask him to check on our property. He called back 20 minutes later, confused. He said our house was fine. No pumpkins anywhere, everything looked normal. The field was actually full again, he said. Looked like we had a great crop waiting to be harvested. I knew then that they were waiting for us to come back, so I hired a crew and had them burn the entire field. Every pumpkin, every vine, every inch of soil. I told them it was diseased, which wasn't entirely a lie. They burned for 3 days straight. The smoke was thick and black and smelled like burning meat, not burning vegetables. The fire department came because neighbors complained about the smell, but I told them it was controlled burning of agricultural waste. Legal, if unusual. When it was over, I had the soil tested. The results came back contaminated with something the lab couldn't identify, some kind of fungal network that had spread throughout the entire field, connecting every plant. The mycologist who examined it said it was like the pumpkins had been networked together, sharing resources and information like a single organism, rather than individual plants. He'd never seen anything like it and wanted to study it further. I told him I'd burned everything and there was nothing left to study. He was disappointed. I was relieved. We never went back to the farm. We sold it from a distance to a developer who's turning it into a housing subdivision. The pumpkin field is being paved over, covered in concrete and asphalt, buried under houses and streets. I hope that's enough. I hope whatever was growing there can't survive under all that weight. But I don't think I'm safe. 2 months ago, a package arrived at our new house, 2 states away from the farm. No return address, no note. Inside was a pumpkin seed. Just one single seed. I flushed it down the toilet immediately. But last week, Sarah called me at work, panicked. There was a pumpkin growing in our backyard. Just one, coming up through the grass, already the size of a softball, even though we were in the wrong season and had never planted anything there. I dug it up, roots and all, and burned it in a metal barrel. But the next day there were 2 more. I burned those too. Yesterday there were 4. Today there are 8. They're coming back. Whatever I grew on that farm, whatever I fed with fertilizer and watered and cared for, it's following us. It knows where we are. And I think it's angry that I burned the field. Sarah wants to move again. Farther this time, maybe to a city where nothing grows, where everything is concrete and steel. But I don't think it'll matter. I think wherever we go, they'll find us. Because I was the one who planted them. I was the one who nurtured them. And in whatever way they understand things, I'm theirs now. We're theirs. If you're reading this, if you bought a pumpkin from my farm last October, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was selling. I didn't know what I'd grown. But if your pumpkin seemed too perfect, if it made you uncomfortable, if it ever came back after you threw it away, don't bring it in your house. Don't carve it. Don't let it sit on your porch. Because they're waiting. They're watching. And they're patient. They'll wait until you let your guard down, until you think it's safe, and then they'll show you what they really are. I have to go now. Sarah just called from the backyard. She's crying. She says the pumpkins have started opening, not rotting, not splitting from age. Opening, like they're blooming, like they're ready to release whatever's inside. I can see them from the window. 16 perfect pumpkins all arranged in a circle in our yard, all opening at the same time. And something is coming out, something that looks like vines at first, but moves like arms, reaching, searching, looking for us. If you're a farmer, if you grow pumpkins, check your soil.
Check your seeds.
Check your crop for perfection, because nature is never perfect. And if you find pumpkins that look too good to be true, burn them. Burn your entire field if you have to. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't grow something you can't control. Don't harvest what you don't understand. Because sometimes, the thing you're growing isn't a crop. Sometimes, you're just feeding something that's been sleeping in the soil for longer than humans have been farming. Something that's been waiting for the right person to wake it up. And once it's awake, it's always hungry. Finally, these 4 stories come from people who will never look at pumpkins the same way again. Some of them have moved on, trying to forget what happened. Others are still living with the consequences, watching and waiting for what comes next. I've changed identifying details to protect them, but the experiences are real. The fear is real. And the pumpkins. Well, Halloween is coming again. This year, when you're out shopping for your perfect pumpkin, take a moment. Really look at it. Does it feel right? Does it feel natural? Or is there something underneath that perfect orange skin that's watching you back? Because here's the thing about carving pumpkins. When you cut into them, when you hollow them out and put a light inside, you're not making them into something. You're revealing what was always there. You're giving them a face to show you what they really are. You're giving them a voice, and sometimes, when you light that candle and see that face glowing in the dark, you might realize too late that you weren't the one who decided what face to carve. The pumpkin knew all along. Happy Halloween, and whatever you do, don't let them watch you sleep.